Today we're going to talk about a POE, a post-occupancy evaluation. And I'm really interested in this because in my 20 years with building design and construction, we've come across very few post-occupancy evaluations by architecture firms or contractors or owners of buildings. So this is really, really exciting for me. And we're going to be talking to three experts on that, people who were directly involved in the post-occupancy evaluation of the eSTEM Academy in Eastvale, California. That's a school district, the Corona-Norco School District, USD, in Riverside County, which is what, about 45 miles east of LA, in the famous Inland Empire. And we're talking today to Dr. Kim Law, pardon me, who is the former director of the eSTEM Academy and is now an official director in the Office of Education for Riverside County. We're talking to Stephanie Matsuda Strand, who is the project architect with LPA Architects, project designer on the eSTEM Academy, and Kimmery Phillips, who's with LPA RED, their research group within LPA Architects. She's the senior research analyst there. So I know there was a lot of planning that went into eSTEM Academy, which was kind of an offshoot of the big high school there, Roosevelt High School. So who can tell us, just kind of what the concept was going back to about 2015 or so? Who wants to take that?
Mind taking that. And if I'm leaving anything out, Kim, feel free to supplement. But when we joined the project, really the goal was to add about 40 new classrooms to an existing high school of about 4,000 students already. So already kind of a really big school that we were adding to. And the emphasis here was going to be a CTE program. And through actually the process of our planning, we sort of as a group decided that that was going to be health medical pathway and an engineering and design pathway.
Okay, CTE meaning, of course,
career technical education.
Career technical, right? Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah.
Right. So we came in and it was really the first 2 months was just a deep dive with a tremendously invested stakeholder group of more than 50 people. It was everyone from students, parents, neighbors, city council members, our sort of design team and engineers, all of the there were board members at a district level, other facilities members, and then of course a ton of staff, teachers, facilities folks over at the high school. So we had a lot of different voices and a lot of different great kind of priorities for this new school.
Yeah.
And so we spent that first little bit as a team really digging in and really understanding everyone's priorities and sort of synthesizing that down to a handful of core values that we took forward for the design process.
Dr. Law, what were you looking for at that point when you had all these people interacting? What did you hope to achieve at that point with this new facility?
Yeah, at that time it was communicated to us that we obviously had a capacity issue, so we had to build additional to meet that increased enrollment of at that time. I think we were about 4,300, anticipating 5,000. And Roosevelt campus was built originally just for 4,000 students. So
because this whole area is really growing like crazy, right? I mean,
yes,
it
right
was
now.
an old dairy farm area, if I recall correctly, and,
yes.
and it's just exploding with new development and so forth. So yeah.
Yes.
So go ahead, please.
So the idea was to build with a purpose. And so, some of the input and feedback that we got from our community is like Stephanie said, with the CTE focus, but specifically with engineering in the medical field, because there is a high need to fill those jobs in those areas within the Inland Empire. So part of that advisory committee, we also had people in the industry, in the engineering field at UC Riverside, University of California, Riverside, as well as Norco College, which has a very strong engineering program. So, if we're going to build, and let's get our students ready for those two fields specifically, because there was so many jobs that needed to be filled.
Yeah.
So that was the demand in the industry in our area.
So there was a sense that that you wanted to create a high school that gave graduates an opportunity that probably they're going to go right into either health, medical, or design engineering if they so chose to do so.
Yes, correct.
Okay, I would opt for the classics as well, but that's okay. That's all right. All right. So, uh, and you created a whole a whole document. You did all the planning, and you built the school. Okay.
We
So
did.
there's where we are. We got it. When was your first occupancy? Was that right before COVID?
Yeah, it was fall. We moved in August of 2019.
Okay. Okay. So you just got in. You got one semester in, and then
And then
disaster
we
hit in the
closed.
second bit. Okay,
Yes.
all right. Okay, so now we have a sort of a timeline. So then we want to know, we've built this beautiful school. We're going to be showing pictures here of, it's a spectacular facility. I mean, any uh, 16 to 18-year-old would be delighted to go to school here. I mean, it's beautiful. Uh, but you wanted to know, did any of the design features that we uh, incorporated in here. I mean, there's some very interesting special things that you did. And I'm going to ask Kimmery to talk about the POE study. You came back and said, hey, any of this work? Tell us about that, Kimmery.
Right. What we like to do is we want to go back to our projects, whether we go early on, as the case was with this project, or a year or two out. We want to see whether and how those design goals were met. So we met with the design team, and figured out what really did they want to learn about, what did they want to know. So definitely all their efforts to design for collaboration, et cetera. We wanted to check into that and see how the students and teachers were experiencing the campus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you prepared a very interesting report. I mean, very detailed with data and so forth. But I want to go through some of the physical design elements that you introduced. You had something like, for example, you had adaptable learning studios, and where you had movable furniture, movable walls, and flex furniture, and tables instead of desks and so forth. What were some of the design features that you incorporated into the project, Stephanie, and how did they turn out in terms of, did they work?
Sure. Um, well, and we developed sort of these kit of parts. This is a public school,
Mhm.
there was a budget we had to be very conscious of, but we wanted to be able to give variety and choice and different kinds of spaces. So we ended up coming up with three prototypical classroom types, each one a little bit different with different amenities. And so our POE asked specifically, which kind of space are you spending most of your time? And in those spaces, what are the most valuable amenities? And
Mm.
they varied a little bit according to which kind of space you were in. But typically, what we were hearing was the movable furniture was a really big I'd say factor in how successful this space was. We do have movable partitions.
Mhm.
Sometimes those are between classrooms for team teaching. It's a project-based learning curriculum, so that's
Yeah.
really helpful in those instances. But sometimes it's the exterior wall that allows you to go inside to outside to be able to maximize your square footage there and
Mhm.
take advantage of the weather. The other thing that we saw a lot of, I think, was just technology. The amount of technology that went into each space in terms of, how many monitors were up on the walls and how visible they became and how easy that allowed instruction and learning in those spaces.
Yeah. Kim, Dr. Law, you had this thing called a spark tank. You had an inquiry lounge. You had, if I remember correctly, you kind of added the student union. That was not originally planned. Is that correct? And you added a student union in there with a cafe and everything. From your experience as the first director there, what stuff did you think worked best, and how was that backed up by the POE?
I think this was all new space, even for our teachers who were veteran teachers that have been teaching 15, 20 years. And so it was that
Yeah.
mindset shift. But I think between the staff, the students, and the teachers, they really appreciated that open space and the ability to collaborate and the flexibility. And our students have never really seen a student union. When you go onto a traditional campus, it's always, the quad area, you've got the library and the career center, but the student union was kind of like a blend of the social as well as the academic piece. And so they really appreciated that flexibility, just being in that space and sitting in the corner and reading their, working or doing their work on their laptop or just socializing with friends. And
Yeah.
so the students really felt that safe space. And coming from an academic side, feeling safe on a campus is very important for us and for students to want to come to school, and as well as staff. And so they felt that was a safe space for them to have a variety of the ability to do a variety.
So different from even 10, 15 years ago in terms of, and of course, in Southern California, you've got the advantage of the outdoors, and you had some outdoor spaces. Kimmery, what worked with the teachers and the students on the outdoor spaces? You had an amphitheater there. There's something called the lunch shelter, covered walkways. Which of these things proved valuable in terms of pedagogy and student learning?
Yeah, I know the outdoor spaces were definitely designed, student center designed. I think there were some issues, and Dr. Law can elaborate as to whether the students felt agency to use that space. There's always supervision issues when there's multiple spaces around a campus. So I think the indoor-outdoor connection was definitely highly rated. I'm trying to think though. I do feel like the outdoor spaces weren't quite as utilized as we thought.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Dr. Law can elaborate. And but I do know that sorry, I don't have it right in front of me, but that the students and teachers definitely like that indoor-outdoor connection, the daylighting and all that. So
yeah.
Dr.
Law,
yeah.
I'm sorry. From your experience in that as director in that early days there, were you seeing the outdoor spaces getting used? What was going on there?
I will say the outdoor space wasn't being used as much. I think is just the timing in the season, because when we just first opened it, then it was kind of hit with winter. I will say that the amphitheater, even we just last week, I went back for a stole ceremony, and parents used that amphitheater outside. And so, we started to use that. We even did a movie night. And so we see a lot of, functionality of that piece. We just haven't had the opportunity to use it. But
let me ask, I'm sorry, go ahead, Dr. Law, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Our teachers were taking their classes outside and using the outside board and plugging in, using data and taking their classes outside.
Okay. Was one of the goals, if I remember correctly, of the educational vision statement was project-based learning.
Correct.
And do you think that the design aided project-based learning, and did any of that come out in the POE? I'll leave that up. Ask any of you to respond to that.
I mean, I would say in the report, there was a lot of mention of project-based learning and how the space allowed for that. With space learning, it wasn't very much a straight curriculum, but the students were trying to, devise questions or, solve real world problems. And so that idea of exploration and inquiry learning and hands-on in the lab piece, and working between language arts teachers and PE teachers and engineering teachers and math teachers, that ability to just open up their classrooms and collaborate and go from one class to the next. And even in the engineering lab, you can walk across 3 different classrooms to access, materials and whatnot. It really, the space really helped us do the work that we needed to do with project-based learning. And
Stephanie, let me ask you, one of the other aspects of the design was the building as a teaching mechanism itself. So teaching solar, teaching wind, teaching water conservation, and so forth. How successful was that in terms of, did the teachers get into that? Did they, did they do measurements, et cetera? Or did the students get it that this was a sustainably designed building and so forth? How did that work out on the design side?
Well, in terms of the way that it's functioning, I think we really we hit the mark in a lot of ways. I'd say wind was probably the biggest component that we had a challenge with, just because of the the location. It really has. It really has strong winds several times a year. And so the building placement and orientation of where it is even sitting on the site had to be really thought through, so that the courtyard was a usable space and that people would be able to open their doors, that kind of thing. So in terms of the way that it's functioning, I think all that ended up really great. Not only did we, try to overlay that sustainability sort of educational component, but you know, we really tried to infuse the whole campus with these little Easter eggs of knowledge. You know, we have references to EKG, you know, tracking. We have references to, you know, the way that muscles move, and we have code that's been written by actually one of the eSTEM students that's it encrypts wayfinding. And so there was sort of a layered approach to try to infuse this space with as much sort of demonstrative design as possible. And whether
Okay.
or not that ended up sort of matriculating into the curriculum, Kim would probably be able to say better than I.
And what lessons, I'm going to ask each of you, what lessons did you all, each of you, derive from doing this work that you would perhaps apply to your next project, or Dr. Law in her work with the with the County Office of Education? Where is this going, and what advice would you have to our audience here about, hey, you know, would you do this again? Would you do another POE, and would you do an eSTEM like this again? So I'll start with you, Kimmery, in response to
In
my
terms,
question.
sure, yeah, in terms of the confidence in the data, in terms of the methodology for this early POE that we did, we focused, and partly because of COVID restrictions, we did focus on survey.
Mhm.
So in the future is when we're going to want to go out there and actually observe the spaces in use. So
Okay.
there may be a little of that Hawthorne effect, but after a short time, we end up kind of, you know, being those kind of fly on the wall, and I think we'll be fine. But in terms of I think we've got a great representation of the students. We had about a super high response rate of like in 50 some percent of
That's good. That's good.
58% of teachers and 63% of the students that we
Mhm.
reached out to. So I think we have strong representation there, and we asked such a breadth of questions, and we asked it about the variety of spaces, as Stephanie mentioned. So it was very focused in. It wasn't just like general, you know, blanket, like, how do you like the school? We did ask that, of course, but so I think we found out a lot about the usage of the space, the rating of the space, you know, what they're really utilizing it for. But I would like to get out there and do some observations
Yeah.
in the
Always important to
future.
actually
Sure.
take your data and then match
Right.
it to what's going on. Stephanie, what did you learn from this as a designer?
I learned the design is only as good as the users will allow it to be. And you know, we provided so many sort of scary and new amenities, I think, to, you know, a bunch of educators, so, you know, a lot of whom were really excited about adopting a new way of sort of teaching and of living in a
Hmm.
school. But I
One of
think
them
there
was
was
this. One of them was this spark tank. What was that?
So Spark Tank was just, it was simply a small breakout area that we were giving the two classrooms to share. And so that
Okay.
was to be used however it needed to. We had smaller Spark, bigger collabs, you know, all these varieties of spaces. But again, that asks for trust. It asks for trust between a teacher and the students who are going to be maybe
Hmm. Interesting.
uh,
Okay.
we Right. Like another big thing was just the amount of glaze. We have a tremendous amount of glazing on this, which the POE has come back to prove has been, you know, all of the users really love. So when we were meeting and in planning and as an advisory group, there was a lot of, I'd say, hesitance on introducing a ton of glazing in this project. The reasons being, you know, fear of distraction, fear of maybe lack of safety. There was a, you know, lack of wall space for pinup and storage, and there were a number of reasons why the amount of glass
Okay.
was
Mm.
scary. But our POE has sort of, I think, been a great example of benefit of all that glazing, the views, the connectedness of the campus,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
connectedness to the mountains in the sort of in the background.
So that's going to
Um,
give you an opportunity to say, hey, on your next project, hey, we had some opposition about glazing. It's working. You know, we have data that it's actually working. So,
Absolutely.
Dr. Law, you get the last shot here.
I,
What did
I
you learn?
I will say, I think what was important is to have that clear and to communicate that clear shared vision of the purpose of the building. Having been a part of that design process,
Hmm.
literally it was even on the application. If a teacher wanted to come to Eastvale STEM Academy, they had to be willing to be flexible, you know, accept a lot of transparency, collaboration. And there was even a statement on the application that says you will not be teaching in a classroom with four walls.
Yeah.
It will be open, and so you need to be willing to do that. And so I think having that clear shared vision, and even when we got into the building, I explained to the staff, I expect to see collaboration. This is how project-based learning, this is how STEM is done in the real world, is through collaboration, not in isolation. So
and culture of innovation was another keystone of what you were talking about. So I assume the teachers had to accept that too, that it was not the same old, same old.
Yes, yes. And then just building that collective efficacy to take those risks together, I think was important. But I also wanted to add on the piece where you said the building itself is a teaching, I guess, something that you can teach their students with. And I've shared this with Stephanie. We've had so many of our engineering students recreate the building using CAD and Fusion. It's just amazing how they are just, and they even, a student even programmed a game in Roblox using the building. So
wow.
They took the building itself and the design, and that's what they did during COVID. They would send me their links to the Fusion, say, look what I created because I'm bored.
Cool.
To me,
Very
that
cool.
was, that's not just boring. I mean, you just recreated the building using Fusion and all of these programs. So it's amazing. Yeah. So
Fantastic.
great experience for everyone.
Well, thank you so much for your time here. We've been talking about the post-occupancy evaluation that LPA Architects and their research division, LPA RED, has done on the eSTEM Academy in Corona-Norco USD out in Riverside County, Eastvale, California. I've been speaking with Stephanie Matsuda Strand, who's was the project designer for LPA on the project, and Kimmery Phillips with LPA RED and senior research analyst, and Dr. Kim Law, who was the first director of the academy and is now with the Office of Education of Riverside County. Thanks so much to all of you for your time and for an interesting project and an interesting follow-up.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.